Here with my co-host and friend, Dr. Jeffrey Smith. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Jim, how are you today, my friend?
I am well. I am well. Been productive and busy and having all kinds of insights and amazing stuff going on. I watched a video today that really blew my mind. I'll send it to you later. Really, really good, grounded, powerful information about this sort of time frame, which I just found really, really good. You may have seen it already, but anywho, here we are, and today we are focusing on our own research and experiences with plant-based medicines. We've done a lot of work thus far, actually on one of our sister programs on BBS Radio. We are starting a six-part series there with a list of podcasts that we did that are focused in specifically in plant-based medicines and all kind of aspects of that. We've brought in Paul Diamond, who is a shaman and ayahuasquero from Peru, on many of those episodes to give us another level of clarity and understanding about the realities of these medicines. And so as Jeff and I were conversing and as our research and stuff continues, we really wanted to kind of talk from our own perspective, just from, a couple of, pardon the expression, but I'm going to say it anyway, a couple of white guys from America who, are doing our thing here. I think the important thing is the recognition that this is truly for us about research and experience. This is about how do we lift ourselves and expand ourselves. And so this is not our opportunity to go, gosh, this is great, we can get high on a regular. We're both 50 somethings and really doesn't hold that much appeal in that function. So please know that we are coming from a very genuine place about this, and we are supportive of the idea ultimately that this is a foundation for us to catapult ourselves and anyone who might be interested into really quantum expansion. So that's my overdone intro for today.
Yeah, it's a good place to start, Jim. I would like to put out there that from the 25 something years that I've been providing psychotherapy to a wide range of different ages of people, cultures, situations, circumstances, diagnoses, pathologies, the quest for me is about ultimate achievement of wellness, peace, tranquility, harmony, unity. And the more and more I study this and have my own experiences with it and provide coaching and counseling and therapy, and I have my own group of people that are also pursuing all of these possible venues of helping people feel better, helping people live better, helping people be better. So for me, the exploration of alternative therapies, how we get to a place of exploring alternative therapies is that the mainstream therapies have been shortcoming. They don't work. They don't solve for X. They don't get people to a place where you know who you are and you know why you're here, you know what you're here to do, and that you're moving more and more and more day by day into becoming the energy of love and moving away from being in and living in an energy of fear. So, as Jim stated, all of the information that we're sharing is not about what to do in preparation to go to a rave or a New Year's Eve party. And if that sounds judgmental, please don't hear it that way. That's just not where we're coming from for the use of these antigens or these chemicals or plants or whatever you want to call it. If that's where your interest is, you're not going to hear us talk much about that particular use or purpose for these medicines. We're really looking at helping people become free from their pain, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And that's what we're finding, again, in our own personal experiences, as well as the research that we're doing through books that we're reading, looking at other journal articles, the compilation of all the different folks that we know that are also fascinated by what plant-based medicines offer. So I want to put a disclaimer out there that nothing that we are saying is true, even though it is the way things are. And I'm going to let you think about that for a second. Ultimately, we're trying to help ourselves and help others live in harmony and live in peace. If you want to get into this really deep dive, where we're going to wind up at the end of this telecast today, or this live cast that we're doing, is that we're exploring really what pain is, what sin is, what karma is, and how these plant-based medicines really allow you to explore that and see and know the origins of the things that are holding you back, that are putting limits on your consciousness, that are putting limits on how you're living your life, and why you're so willing to show up so much less than who we are, who we really are, what we really are, and who we really are. And that's really where we're coming from as to why go there. In some regard, if you spent 20 to 25 years in a spiritual practice that involved, say, Kriya Yoga as one form of yoga, there are about 7 mainstream types of yoga. Kriya happens to be one that Jesus Christ practiced, that Yogananda practiced, that Babaji practiced, Krishna practiced these. And it allows you to enter a state of mind that transcends physical discomfort in the body. And you're out there operating in a celestial and astral dimension that really allows you to see how the universe works, how the universe fits together. You get to operate in different dimensions of time and space and energy. And if all this sounds fantastical to you, I hope it does. And I hope that whets your appetite and deepens your curiosity to either, one, create a spiritual practice that involves some form of yoga or meditation that really does allow you to transcend the physical. And yet the masters would say that could take 10 to 20 years to do that, of which I'm not interested in spending 10 to 20 years to learn how to do that. When what I have personally found is that plant-based medicines take you to that place organically. And then once you've discovered how to get there, then you don't necessarily need to keep getting through that portal or using the medicines, because you now know how to get there. It's just like, you use a map in the beginning to get you somewhere, and after you've traveled that path for a while, you no longer need the map. The map now gets inside your head, and you just drive or walk or travel to your destination. So how's that for a long-winded introduction as to where we're going to find ourselves going today?
Good stuff. It was reminding me of again, this video. One of the things that this doctor talked about. Young guy living, I think he's in Hawaii. Just an extraordinary conversation about just a small segment. He was talking about how the earth handles. He was using farmers as an example when he was talking about COVID and talking about the evolution of this. And he talks about in depth about how many viruses and bacteria and parasites we live with on a daily basis, just as human beings. That our biome, our microbiome, is pretty much loaded with all of that stuff. And he was referencing how important the health of, when we were talking about farming, he was talking about the health of the soil, and how putting all the chemicals into the soil and continuing to recycle. When you clear a field and the weeds show up, the weeds are actually the microbiome attempting to create balance in the soil again. And what we've done is turned the idea of weeds into a bad thing that we have to kill, so we add more chemicals to kill it. And so here we are in a situation with a virus that we don't understand, that just kills us randomly depending on whatever it is it's doing. Although it could be focused in the lungs, we're not really sure. But let's fight it some more so that we can make sure it does destruction. But anyway, so this whole idea that you were talking about, plant-based medicine, the plant-based medicine foundation, one of the other things that strikes me about this is that it's not the be all end all. Meaning, Jeff was talking about, being a monk or being in training for 20 or 30 years to reach a place where you feel like you're reaching that expansion level. And what this does is gives you a quantum step ahead of that. I would add to that in my experience, it doesn't change, it radically changes the course of your evolution, but it doesn't change that there is a time element that still will continue. But the difference being that, like for myself, where I was 10 years ago compared to where I am now, I don't even know that I could compare the two places. So over time, you're still migrating, you're still evolving, you're still going through that process. I would say it's much more fruitful because you get that initial lift up that gets you clarity, and one of the other things you talked about, and one of the things I didn't hear you say about the connection to the medicine, is the key thing that it does is it gives you a sense of why you're here. Mm-hmm. It may not tell you your purpose. It may not give you some grand, beautiful scheme of what you're going to do when you're done, but your sense of order in the universe, your sense of participation and necessity in the context of universe is so profound that foundation alone can feed you for years. It can just, because there's so much there that you can get into and so much there that you can digest and really, really dive into. So right. Two key things. It gives you a perspective that enables you to, in our last livecast, we talked about reframing. This gives you a chance to reframe in such a paradoxically profound way. I love that word, paradoxically profound. It's actually two words, but I had fun saying it. So we get this whole new experience of why we're here, which eliminates so much of the resistance that people feel to begin with, because that whole religious overlay that lets you feel like you're a nobody until God tells you you're somebody. This is going to God and God saying, you're damn right you're somebody. Get with the program. Let's go. And that sounded judgmental, and that doesn't feel that way, actually. The love is so empowering and so incredible that you just sort of feel this overwhelming. So yeah, great place to start. I changed here that with these plant-based medicines, this is a powerful opportunity to deep dive into those segments of ourselves. Who are we? Why are we here? And what do we have to learn? And so today our hope is that we can illuminate that a little bit more and give you some more of that practical truth that helps you to decide if this is a course of action that serves you. We're not trying to prescribe or anything like that. We're simply sharing experiences and our research in hopes that, again, if this is something that will help you build your foundation, it's an excellent tool for that.
Right. So if we're ready to start with some of the lessons learned or realizations or awarenesses that have come from exploring the potential of the plant-based medicines, I'd like to start with two major categories. When you're talking about using plant-based medicines, you're talking about one category of macro dosing and another category of micro dosing. The definition of a macro dose would be a large enough a dose that it's going to be perceptual, in that it's going to have an enhanced, altered way of changing your perceptions about how you're seeing the universe. The other category would be microdose, which the definition of that would be a sub-perceptual amount that you're taking that keeps the whole system going, keeps the whole energy flow going, but it doesn't alter your day in and day out activities. It's very much like when you take a multivitamin, you can drive, you can go to work, you can do everything. Your consciousness is not altered in such a way that it inhibits you from doing anything. So primarily people start out microdosing to introduce the plant to their system just to see if they have any abreactions or allergies, or how they're going to actually interact with the plant, whichever one that they're using. And we're not taking a position on any of the plants. However, there do seem to be some that are much more powerful and have a much greater potential for consciousness expansion or consciousness awareness. But what's really fascinating is after you start exploring the interaction between the plants, you can use some that are very, very powerful to actually enhance the ones that are less powerful that you might explore, say, more frequently. Any thoughts about what I've shared so far, Jim?
Yeah, I would like to jump into this because what I was hearing running around in my head is particularly for those people out there who don't have a clue, or maybe about plant-based medicine, or maybe you're just starting on your journey, or maybe you're not sure where you're at in your journey, but you feel like you need, you want to take another step. I would personally encourage you to engage in a group situation, engage with someone who knows the medicine, not your best friend, but someone who actually who creates ceremony, who creates an environment where you can, at least for initially, an initial experience, have an environment that is created to keep you safe and to keep you in an energy that is supportive of the process. When you've not experienced plant-based medicine before or psychedelics before, it isn't, and this isn't about fear, this is just about being practical, understanding who you are. Because you don't want to create a circumstance where you go in with expectations and then are disappointed or frustrated, which creates a different experience in the journey by virtue of that. So if you're going to the journey and you're trying to dig your way through something, it's going to be a very difficult and challenging experience because the medicine is about surrender. And in order to surrender, you have to be in an environment that you feel safe enough to surrender. So yes, you can do that initial one by yourself at home. But if you don't have someone guiding or at least giving you some support, you may not know what you're dealing with. You may not know what you might see, where you might be experiencing, and helping you to, again, that reframing is so important, helping you to keep a focus and a surrender that allows you to go into the medicine in a sacred way so that you are prepared for what's going to unfold. Meaning you're not going to have any clue what's going to unfold, but energetically you're prepared so that what comes to you is observational. What comes to you is stuff you can digest, or at least stuff you can take in, as opposed to stuff that feels overwhelming and, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? And now my life is over. You don't want to go there in the middle of a journey. You want to be able to, you're going to go through whatever emotions you go through, but I guess I want to lay that foundation. It's just, I encourage or suggest that if you're going to take this step, find somewhere that you can engage it with someone who understands it, that has history with it, that can help you set your own foundation before you go off on your individual journeys, if that's what you choose. That would be my input.
Yes, I would like to double down on Jim's cautionary information that the potentiality of the perceptual change and shift in your consciousness is so profound that I would not recommend doing this on your own until you have quite a bit of experience and you have no history of any kind of multiple personalities or any kind of family history of schizophrenia or anything that could be triggered by history of panic attacks, that sort of thing. So there needs to be due diligence to who is a candidate and who is not, even before you, and you got to read some books. You can't just start with this. That would be foolish. Just like you wouldn't just, if you could go buy Prozac on the street, hopefully you wouldn't just go buy it and start taking it and see what happens. That has to be administered by a doctor. There needs to be somebody that's got history with it, understands what they're doing, before you just dabble in this. And that's really another differentiation between the more party use of it, or fun use of it, versus medicinal and growth use of these substances.
Yeah, the only other piece I would add to this, Jeff, just because of who I am in our conversations, is that understand that plant-based medicine experience is an energetic, personal, deep energetic experience. So everything that affects your energy or affects the energy of the space or affects anything in that fashion will have an impact on your journey, because the journey is about the energy you take into it. When I went a couple years back, and I went to Peru, and I journeyed with ayahuasca, 3 times. Um, I spent 2 months before I left focusing on nothing but learning how to surrender. That was my mission in life, was looking for every way possible that if I was being confronted by things, that I could find a way to surrender to whatever was happening so that I could get used to whatever was going to come, and realizing that it's all objects in the field of my awareness, because I gave myself permission to learn and to understand more deeply this surrender aspect. It's not giving into the medicine, it's not giving up to the medicine, it's surrendering to your own energy, to your own field, and surrendering to that experience. Because so many times we hear, and I've heard this over years and years of, bad trips, and oh my God, we can't do that because, I don't want to deal with whatever's in there. It's you. That's what's in there. You. Nothing more, nothing less. It's all you. So again, the surrender is about being willing to surrender to all aspects of who you are and embracing every ounce of it. Because what you find out is you're not a dick, you're not an asshole, you're not stupid, you're not lame, you're not anything else you've called yourself for the last 25 years. You're an exquisite expression of God, and you still may judge yourself occasionally. But the idea being surrender to all of it so that you can have that initial experience of tapping into you, letting the medicine take you deeply into you. And that will create the most profound experience.
Nicely said. Yeah. So if we've finished the part of the differentiation between microdosing and macrodosing, and just as a quick summary again, the macrodosing would be in quantities greater than the microdosing, significantly greater, to produce a profound shift in awareness and consciousness, where the microdosing would be daily use, like a multivitamin or any other vitamins people use, or supplements that they use on a daily basis. And oftentimes this might be a 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 days on, 1 day off, just to prevent any type of a tolerance from being built. And it rebaselines the use of the medicines. And all this, again, can be found in a multitude of awesome books that are out there. How to Change Your Mind is a really excellent resource. Even if you notice, recently Netflix has a whole series on the use of plant-based medicines. It's a show called Psychedelica.
That's actually very.
Oh, Gaia puts that on? I thought I saw that on Netflix also.
There is another, there, and it may be there on both, but there is another one definitely on, because I just watched one 2 days ago on Netflix that was really, really good. But we can put all of those in the notes. After the show, Jeff and I will coordinate, and we'll get a list of suggested material that you all can kind of explore, just to give you a basis, a starting point. That you can explore some of this material and dive in a little further deeper.
Yeah, but for folks that might be hearing this new to this, just know that you really don't have to look very far to find some really good, well-qualified, well-studied, well-researched, well-published, easily accessible information to help increase your awareness and understanding of you possibly considering having your own experience with these plant-based medicines.
Yeah.
And the purpose of it, again, would be to compare it to any practice that you're using now for health and wellness, to see if this might produce a more rapid improvement or advancement in the path that you're traveling. I want to put it out there that this is not magic beans. It's not intended to be a shortcut, although we can talk about it that way. It's intense, and therefore, in some regard, there are terms that call it a hero's journey, that you literally have the mindset of being heroic and a hero in looking at those things that you fear. And it's going to show up. The medicines make you look at, they drive you to look at the things that you are in fear of. and most, some people would say, well, I'm not afraid. Well, I'm talking about subconscious, unconscious fears that you don't even know that are buried in there, that could be from a multitude of past lives, or an aggregate, or even at more of a Jungian collective conscious fear that we live in a society right now where there's this thing that we're calling a virus, and it's generating a lot of fear. And whether you individually embrace that fear or not, through the placebo effect, you're inundated by the energy of the virus. Therefore, it creates a fear. And that's going to show up in your subconscious, unconscious mind, whether you like it or not, whether you're willing to admit it or not, it's there. And these medicines really, in a profound way, bring it into a conscious awareness that you then can see you're whole, you're complete, you lack for nothing. There isn't anything in the universe that's ever been created that can harm you, or no weapon can be fashioned against you. There's so many different historical sacred manuscripts that you can draw from to bring those into consciousness, that you really get to see it and experience it. And through the seeing and through the experiencing, that creates a noesis or a noetics, or a way of knowing both consciously, intellectually, academically, physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, because you can know things at all of those levels or in all of those ways. But this creates an aggregate or a composition of knowing at all those levels that's quite profound and quite amazing.
If I could, just a second, I want to roll back, because I want to talk a little bit about dosing, not from recommendation, but from people understanding, because again, it was sort of a generalization, and I want to be clear with people so they understand that when you're dosing, this is a self-driven process, because you don't know what your chemistry is going to do with the medicine and how it responds to the medicine. Everyone will have a response. Everyone will have an experience. It's going to vary from person to person. So when Jeff is talking about microdosing, that's like 100 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams roughly, maybe up to 2,000, but typically probably about 1,000. When you get into dosing, then you're talking about grams. So now you're into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grams. The hero's journey that Jeff is talking about, I believe, is 5+ grams of particularly of psilocybin. It's different for ayahuasca because it's brewed and it's created differently. So they're two very different things. But I know with when we're talking about psilocybin, we're talking about mushrooms, we're talking about a span of potentiality there. And so it's important to be safe and to be conscious of how you're engaging with that medicine, which is why all of this is so important to having a good, solid daily practice that you rely on and that keeps you grounded and centered. Having the information, looking at videos, reading books, checking out the information, getting as educated as you can and understanding what this is about. Obviously understand that all the information isn't known, but there's a lot of really good information that can help you set a very powerful movement forward. But the key thing there was just understanding the numbers. 1,000 milligrams is a gram. So if you're dealing with it in that fashion, at least gives you a sense, so that you're not going to microdose 3 grams of mushrooms. That's not. I mean, I guess you could, but you would not be functional for very long. I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong about that. You never know.
Right. So the purpose of our live cast today is not a how-to informational. It's more about the benefits of, as well as what not to do so you don't hurt yourself. That's first and foremost, has to be our number one concern, is don't mess around with this stuff if you're not willing to respect it and honor what it's there to do, and really to truly get an understanding of it.
Yeah.
I really want to emphasize that.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that. I want to tease a little bit, because we're talking about, our research and experience. And next Wednesday, Paul Diamond will be joining us again, and we are going to dive more deeply into the symbolism and more deeply into actual stuff that, how do you translate? How do you bring it back? What's the symbology? We'll get into that more thoroughly next Wednesday. We may touch a little bit here, but just to Jeff's point, we're laying a foundation. We want to make sure that you're safe. We want to make sure you have some deeper understanding so that you can begin your own exploration.
Okay, so I think we've wrapped up all the precautionary aspects of this, as well as the differentiation between micro and macro dosing. And if we could explore perhaps now more of the potentials and where you may find medicines taking you from experiences that Jim and I have had and are willing to talk about and share, that that's the direction that we could take this part of the telecast or livecast to now.
Yeah. Can we talk just for a second? We didn't really dive into. We talked about dosing. We talked about surrender. I just want to spend a minute on the integration process. It's a monumental part of the process because it's the one that really takes the time. It's the thing that requires your attention. So there's a lot that goes on both on the macro and micro level through the course of a journey. And a lot of it, much of it, you may remember, there's suggestions about journaling, writing things down, capturing what you can, so that when you're not in journey, you'll be able to recall, because there's so much information that can come through. So the integration process is significant because it's still, in part, I think, not real well defined, because again, the process is so immensely personal. But know that from the point that you engage, you are beginning a journey, and that journey requires time for integration and more surrender, and integration and more surrender. Because once you open your energy in that fashion and give yourself permission to go there, you have now increased your vibration, you've increased your frequency, you've expanded the whole field in which you exist. That requires time and energy and nourishment and daily practice to really lay that in a way that you get the most benefit. Because there's a lot of stuff you may never understand, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to require your focused attention, or your ability to focus and be in attention to whatever the information is. So I don't know if you have anything you want to add to the integration piece, but if not, we can carry from there. Yeah,
I would liken what you're talking about right now, Jim, really to dream analysis or psychotherapy, psychoanalysis. That there are people that truly have a gift in being able to hear bits and pieces of a person's dream, or bits and pieces of a person's conscious or minimally subconscious thoughts, and having a gift of interpretation or a gift of understanding to be able to help bring this symbology forward. And the reason that this is so important, folks, is that in previous podcasts, we've talked about the human mind is divided up into three major categories: conscious, subconscious, unconscious processing. The conscious mind, our best consciousness researchers tell us, only makes up 2 to 5% of the entire mind. The subconscious mind, we think, may be about 20%, and the remainder in the unconscious realm. But the combination of subconscious and unconscious mind could be as much as 98%, maybe as little as 95%. But I mean, just think about that. There's an inordinate amount of the mind that does not speak the English language. It's only the conscious mind that speaks any language. that knows what a chair is. So we have an experience that's, remember I talked earlier about all the different ways of knowing something. You have the physiology of knowing something. You have the intuitive way of knowing something. You have intellectual categorization, information and data way of knowing something. But when you put all of that together, then you can really say that you know something. And so these journeys that you're having are much like dreams that are operating from the subconscious, unconscious part of the mind. that works in symbols, it works in metaphor, it works in memetics, genetics, urges, impulses, emotion, fear, joy, energy. It's an expression of energy that to the casual observer, you're going to get lost and not have a darn clue as to what you just experienced, but you'll say, that was really nice, or that was really scary. So it's important. And what I've noticed in my little bit of time moving in this direction to greater understand consciousness and to have a greater awareness of what the energy of love is versus the energy of fear, is there are next to no books out there on interpretation. So that field is ripe for anybody that would like to become a subject matter expert on documenting their own experiences, as well as beginning to categorize other people's experiences. Because there's got to be some kind of a generic, if we believe in a collective consciousness and a collective unconsciousness, there has to be some kind of commonality and overlap between journey themes that would be very, very helpful for people. If you're going to be brave enough to step into this, that you would yield the greatest benefit for the time and energy you're spending on it. And when we talk about time and energy, we're talking about 5 to 6, 7 hours of being offline, being in that realm where you're not going to be driving, hanging out with friends. You're going to be ceremonially, very sacredly safe and isolated so that you can have the maximum benefit of these experiences. And then you have, sometimes the medicines can keep you up all night. So you're going to be spending a chunk of time, maybe as many as 12 hours, and you can be exhausted the next day, or you can just be, sometimes the medicine is like a little bonus, and it's like, we're going to give you a freebie last night, and you can make up for it later on in the week, what you lost in sleep. But there is a tremendous investment to have these experiences, and that's why it's called a hero's dose, because it's very heroic to be able to garner the courage to step into these realms of the unconscious, subconscious mind. So again, we want to, Jim brought us back to if you're not willing to do the integration, don't even bother. Don't waste your time. Don't even get started, because I put that in the category of you're just tripping.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's lots of other ways you can go trip. But if you want to have a journey, if you want to have a true spiritual journey and awakening, a conscious expansion, this is the mindset that it takes to step into that.
Jeff, before we dive into the impact here and we talk a little bit more about things like PTSD and depression and anxiety, I wanted to touch base a little bit on what you were saying with regard to that conscious, subconscious, unconscious experience. I see it a little differently, not from an energetic perspective, in the sense that, and we may see it the same way, but that you were talking about in the space of journey, we get to uncover or discover the things that make us collective, the things that are this we are one experience, or we are all part of the same, universal mind or God or whatever. The interesting piece to that, to me, is that given the nature of how this is all constructed, there is a certain portion at the beginning of this, when you dive into this, it's all about the debris that you, the individual ego, have created in your life and maybe in more recent experiences. That the cool thing that happens is that you get, in stepping into this experience and into this journey, you get to see that as stuff, meaning where in your active life, you're consumed by all of your drama and story, right? You're kind of all wrapped up in whatever it is you've developed over the course of your life, to the point that you come to this journey. Well, when you go into the journey, you begin to very quickly see that there is stuff, and there is there's stuff and then there's core. I don't know what the other word is. I'm looking for the other word. And that initially you're clearing out all of the debris to get to the connection, to get to the connectedness that we all have. And so initially, again, that's where the fear, I think, comes in, is we think there are all of these, we know what we've lived our lives. We know all of the things we've done since the day we came on the planet. We know how we treated people. We know why we treated them that way. We know why we act the way we do. We know that we did things that, for some of us, we may not be proud of or happy of or any of the above. There's also the potential of a story that's been created because of abuse, because of other situations. So now you've got all this baggage and you're kind of going, oh my God, I'm going to have to deal with all my baggage. Yeah. But the funny thing is that it objectifies it in the process of this journey if you allow it. If you go at it being afraid and being ready to be consumed, then it will consume you and it will spit you out on the other side, and you'll still go through and come out the other side. It'll just be far more intense and less pleasant. So I'm bringing, again, just the more awareness, the more understanding. I want to lay in these layers of understanding that once you go in to dive into the subconscious and unconscious, it isn't all rainbows and unicorns in this collective place. It's a place of being able to identify how and seeing how we've built these silly and ridiculous stories in our lives that don't serve us at all. And how when we focus on that larger part of ourselves and that spark of God part of ourselves, all of this little stuff over here really is debris. And you get to see it that way, which is really, which is really profound and part of that whole deal of losing the load, as it were.
Absolutely.
So we're looking.
I was thinking as you were talking about dealing with your baggage, what kept coming to me over and over again is not, as much as dealing with it, it's like getting free of the baggage.
Yes.
So just imagine, all of us dragging around balls and chains around our legs and, big bags on our backs. And it's just a way, and it's all loaded up with fear and negative belief systems, lies, distortions of truth. And the mushrooms, the ayahuasca, the peyote, mescaline, all of that really allows you to see that, my goodness, none of that's true. None of any of that stuff is true. And it's freedom is really what the ultimate takeaway is that I'm free to live my life in an energy and in a spirit of love and unity, calm, oneness, courage. And as you have one experience, then your takeaway is going to be profound and amazing. And at some point, maybe a month or two later, you might get the courage up to go in again. The VA in particular, the Veterans Administration, has a protocol that they're getting their patients who have PTSD, depression, anxiety, and addiction issues. They're getting them to the place that they can confidently know that they can do 2.5 grams by themselves. And we're talking about psilocybin or mushrooms in this case. And then they work with a therapist who's been trained to guide them through a hero's dose that starts at the 4 to 5 gram level. And they have people do that twice over the period of a month. But it could take a month to get to your first hero's dose. And then they follow that up with ongoing microdosing on a daily basis, 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 days on, 1 day off, whatever works best for them. But the VA spent lots of money and worked with top level officials and therapists and scientists to develop this protocol. The VA happens to be the world's largest single health organization. They have quite a robust budget and a big database, and they have lots of people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder from their combat experiences or just being in the military in general. Lots of depression, anxiety, and of course, lots of addiction that people pick up other substances to try to, self-medicate their fear, their depression, their anxiety, and all of the above. So that last word that we have in the little caption down there under the impact part of the addiction thing really is a fascinating wild card in that anybody that's coming out of a 12-step or a recovery-based model would instantly, all the people that I've talked about in recovery, that when I casually suggest the possibility of exploring plant-based medicines, the 12-step program, or just kind of the organizational mindset, is you can't do anything that would be mind altering, otherwise you're not sober. But the actual data, the reality shows that these plant-based medicines, because they address pain and because they address fear, once those have been eliminated, people naturally give up the addictions to other substances or behaviors that they were doing. So it's actually counterintuitive in a very positive way that it will actually treat an addiction, because it deals with the underlying issues that the addiction never could deal with.
Jeff,
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, extraordinary. And extraordinary, would you agree that as I think about this, particularly with these things like PTSD and depression, anxiety, addiction, these things that you're talking about through the VA, so we're talking about guys that have been in combat, have been to war. It's so interesting that on the face of it, there is nothing natural about going into that experience. There's nothing natural about willingly going into a circumstance to kill people or to harm people. Not that that's the intention, but if you're in an active combat place or whatever, it's so diametrically opposed to everything that we are that of course it's going to create problems. Of course it's going to create conflict because it's so far afield of who we are. So the plant-based medicine piece of this that's so extraordinary, as Jeff was talking about, is not about, again, it's not about getting high. This is about tapping into a clarity. This is about being able to look at that stretched rubber band, that poor person who was put into a or who chose it, whichever way you look at it, but put into a circumstance that is so radically, I don't know what the good word is here, but stretches the rubber band to the point of almost breaking or breaking. And when you can take a substance, when you can take a natural substance that enables you to see that rubber band and enables you to go, I'm pulling in opposite directions. Okay, that's understandable. I can work with that. Now you get to loosen the grip a little. The bands can come in a little. And as you're working with someone who understands the medicine, understands what's coming from it, now you're seeing that conflict in real lifetime in your experience. But it's an object. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's an object in the field of your awareness. It's not a reliving experience. It doesn't have to be anyway. It doesn't need to be that. It's just letting the medicine help you to see that pulled rubber band and I know I'm simplifying it in a highly gross way, but I simplify it because the story is insignificant. It's the divergence from the core of your vibration that is significant. The story holds relatively no value. It's the emotional impact that has the value. That impact is the stretch. That impact is being in a place that's so far afield of what you know you are that you don't know how to rectify it. That's the conflict. When you can see it, then you can migrate. So anyway, I'm not wanting to go because that could be a whole other topic of conversation. And especially with your background, we could probably spend about a day and a half here. I think anyway, but
Yeah.
anything else, Jeff? You want to? We've got about 5 minutes left. If we want, do we want to dive into this a little more with the treating of PTSD and anxiety and stuff?
No, but I just
Okay.
wanted to put those bullets out there that's why there's a resurgence for science and the medical community to be openly embracing the use of plant-based medicines, because we're all recognizing that what has been out there for the existing therapies is falling woefully short on getting people back to healthy living with purpose-filled, happy, content lives. And so that what hasn't worked is now being recognized. And it's just fascinating to me that Mother Nature is showing up saying, hello, I can help with that if you'll let me.
Yeah.
Um,
Good stuff. So we did talk about some resources. We will, rather than list things here that you have to try to keep up with, we'll make sure to get those into the show notes. Some different resources for you, whether some video or some books or things like that will enable you to dive more deeply into this for yourself. Does that feel all right for you, Mr. Jeff?
Absolutely.
Right.
So before we completely run out of time, I guess we're into review and questions part of it. Just this, the medicine seems to have a universal wisdom that, as much as books and shaman and others who guide sacred journeys will tell you, there needs to be intention set beforehand with what it is that you hope to be shown, guided into, and what you're willing to experience. That kind of like sets the compass with an arrow pointing in a certain direction, that you're telling God or the universe, I have a curiosity and I'm hoping that there's some revelation that will occur behind this curiosity that I'm experiencing. It's an important part of the setup. And then once you step into that, the medicine may say, hey, that was really interesting, and I'm going to completely give you everything you ever hoped for in terms of awareness and understanding about that question or what you wanted to see or experience. And sometimes it goes, okay, well, that's really interesting, but here's what you really need to look at. And that's what happens under the amount of a hero's dose, is you're willing to surrender. The conscious mind is willing to say, I know I can be safe for the next 5 or 6 hours. I trust my environment. I trust the people I'm with or the person I'm with. And I trust God. I trust the angels, spirit guides, masters, whoever you're inviting to be along on this journey with you, that you're going to one by one by one by one by one look at all the belief systems that no longer serve you, the fears that are deeply, deeply embedded, the agony, the grief, all the unresolved issues, the past relationships you've had with people, the present relationships you've had with people. It's like this, taking a box that's got all these puzzle pieces in it and throwing it out on the table. And by the time your journey ends, that puzzle has been put together. And that's what my experience has been. Or if the puzzle isn't completely assembled, there's a heck of a lot more of it that's assembled at the end than there was where you started.
Right on. And we do have to bring this wonderful conversation to a close, unfortunately. It is that time. Jeff, thank you for a great show. I think there's a lot of good information out there, and a lot of good information here to help people better understand, what we've encountered in our experiences with these plant-based medicines, and hopefully for the listener, you've had an opportunity to take it in a little better, take it in a little more, maybe contemplating how this could assist you or not. No one's saying that it is the be all end all. It is really, there is a bit of a calling in it. I think there's a sense of being pulled or being, as a part of your own personal evolution. So take the steps and just left foot, right foot. You don't have to decide. When I finally went to do ayahuasca, it took me a year and a half to get to the place of being prepared for that experience. And that was an active year and a half of just getting my space ready. And am I really being pulled? And is this what I want? And, and just sort of letting it all, learning about surrender. So, so glad that you all are here. So glad that you get to join us and talk about these amazing things. We're excited to be able to interact with you. You can follow us on Facebook, on our website, www.adventuresometruth.com. And we'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. And we'll be live next Wednesday with Paul Diamond. So thank you all for joining us.
Adios, everybody.